It was still dark outside when James Carter walked through the glass doors of the tall office building. He wore the same gray uniform, the same tired shoes, and carried the same bucket and mop that had been his companions for years. The world never looked at him twice. To them, he was just the cleaner, silent, invisible, a shadow who swept their footprints away before the day began. But that morning, something in the air felt different, like the world was holding its breath. James moved through the empty hallway, his footsteps echoing softly against the marble floor. The scent of floor polish filled the air. He liked this quiet hour before the noise began. No bosses shouting, no phones ringing, no one to remind him where he stood. Just peace. He hummed softly to himself as he cleaned the glass near the CEO's private office. That office was off limits, a place where deals worth millions were made. James never entered it. He just cleaned outside and moved on. But that morning something strange happened. From inside the office, a phone began to ring. Once, twice, again and again. It wasn't the sharp sound of a mobile phone. It was a deep, steady ring, the kind of phone you only found on executive desks. The sound echoed through the empty hallway, steady and urgent. James looked around. No one was there. The secretary's chair was empty. The CEO hadn't arrived yet. Still, the ringing continued, louder now, as if begging to be answered. He hesitated. He knew the rules. No touching anything inside. But something in that sound made his heart beat faster. It wasn't just a normal call, it felt desperate. Finally, after another long moment, he pushed the glass door open. The office smelled faintly of coffee and leather. The phone sat on the desk, glowing red. He took a shaky breath, wiped his hands on his shirt, and picked it up. "Hello?" he said softly. There was silence, then a faint crackle, and a voice, a woman's voice, whispered through the line. It was weak, trembling, as if she was scared or hurt. "Please, help me." "Tell him not to sign the deal," she said. James froze. "Ma'am, who is this? What deal?" But before he could ask more, the line went dead. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with something he couldn't name. James stood there, staring at the phone. His hands were cold. He put the receiver down slowly, his heart racing. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone dialed the wrong number. But that voice, it sounded too real, too frightened. He stepped back into the hallway, trying to calm his thoughts. The building was still quiet, but the peace had disappeared. He looked at the door again, half expecting it to ring once more. It didn't, but something inside him told him this wasn't over. A few minutes later, his supervisor walked by, a short, bald man named Mr. Griggs. James hurried up to him. "Sir, someone just called the CEO's office," he said. She sounded in trouble. She said, but before he could finish, Mr. Griggs waved his hand dismissively. "You answered the CEO's phone?" "Are you crazy? That's not your job, Carter. Stick to cleaning. Don't touch what isn't yours." James tried to explain, but the man had already walked away, muttering something about cleaners overstepping. James stood there, feeling small again, like his words didn't matter. But the voice in his head wouldn't stop repeating the same thing. Tell him not to sign the deal. He went back to his cart and continued cleaning, but every sweep of the mop felt heavy. Through the glass, he could see the city waking up. Cars honking, lights flickering, people rushing. Somewhere out there, maybe that woman was still waiting for help. Hours later, the building filled with people. Laughter, phones, footsteps, everything returned to normal. The CEO, Richard Wallace, arrived surrounded by assistants and bodyguards. James watched from the corner as they talked about a big contract meeting later that afternoon. One of them mentioned a foreign client flying in for a final signature. James felt a chill run down his back. The deal. That had to be it. He tried to ignore it. He wasn't part of their world. He was just a cleaner. What could he do? But deep inside, a battle began, between fear and conscience. What if that voice had been real? What if someone's life or fortune depended on it? At lunch break, he sat alone in the storage room, eating from his small lunchbox, replaying the call in his mind again and again. The tone of the woman's voice, it wasn't just fear. It was urgency. She wasn't asking for help for herself. She was warning someone else. James sighed and looked down at his rough hands stained from years of work. "No one will believe me," he whispered. Still, he decided that if something didn't feel right in that meeting, he wouldn't stay silent. He didn't know how, but he would find a way to stop whatever was coming. When he returned to the hallway, the office lights flickered on again. He heard the CEO laughing inside, talking about millions and power, about winning the biggest deal of his career. James paused outside the door, the same phone sitting quietly on the desk now. He took one last look at it and whispered under his breath, "If only you could ring again, maybe I'd know what to do." He didn't know it yet, but that single call, the one he wasn't supposed to answer, had already changed his day, and soon it would change his entire life. James couldn't sleep that night. The woman's trembling voice still echoed in his head like a ghost that refused to fade. "Please, help me. Tell him not to sign the deal." Every time he closed his eyes, he heard it again. It wasn't just fear in her tone, it was desperation. The kind that came from someone who knew something terrible was about to happen. The next morning, he arrived at the office even earlier than usual. The city outside was still quiet, wrapped in fog. He moved silently through the corridors, pretending everything was normal. But inside his chest, his heart was restless. He kept thinking, who was that woman? Why did she sound so close yet so far? And what deal could be so dangerous? By the time the staff arrived, the building had come alive again. Phones ringing, heels clicking on the floor, executives rushing past him like he didn't exist. He pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway and stopped near the big glass conference room. Inside, the CEO, Richard Wallace, was talking with his advisors. The words foreign client, billions, and final signature floated through the air like sparks. James's pulse quickened. That was the same deal the woman had warned about. His mind screamed to speak up, but fear pulled him back. What would he say? "Sir, a strange woman called your office and said not to sign your deal." They'd laugh at him again, maybe even fire him. He had bills to pay. His little sister's medicine depended on his paycheck. He turned away, but just as he was leaving, he noticed something strange. One of the CEO's aides, a tall man in a black suit, kept whispering into his earpiece. His movements were too sharp, his eyes shifting constantly. At one point, he glanced straight at James, then quickly looked away. A chill ran down James's spine. Something wasn't right. Later that morning, while cleaning the CEO's personal lounge, James overheard two secretaries gossiping near the door. "Did you hear? The foreign client insisted on finalizing the contract today, no matter what." "Yeah, but why the rush? He barely gave them time to check the documents." "The boss doesn't care. He just wants that signature. He said this will make him untouchable." Their voices faded as they walked off, but the words stayed. No matter what. That sounded like pressure, like someone pushing too hard, too fast. As James wiped the desk, he glanced at the CEO's tablet left on the table. He didn't mean to pry, but one word caught his eye on the screen. Project Zenith. The same project name he had heard whispered yesterday. His curiosity burned stronger than his fear. He knew he shouldn't, but his hands moved before his mind could stop him. He tapped the screen just enough to see an open message, half deleted as if someone tried to erase it quickly. It read, "Transfer must happen before signature. Make sure no one alerts Wallace." James froze. His stomach twisted. Whoever sent that message didn't want the CEO to know something. It wasn't just a risky deal, it was a trap. Someone inside was playing a dangerous game. He heard footsteps outside and quickly turned off the screen, pretending to clean. The aide in the black suit entered, his eyes cold. "You shouldn't be here," the man said flatly. "I'm just cleaning, sir," James replied quietly. The aide stared at him for a moment too long, then left without another word. James leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Now he was sure the warning call wasn't random. Someone wanted to stop this deal, and that woman was in danger because of it. But how could he, a cleaner with no power, stop billionaires and criminals from destroying each other? That night he took a bus home under the rain. The city lights blurred against the window like streaks of fire. He couldn't tell anyone. Not the police, not his supervisor, not even his sister. He had no proof, just a call, a feeling, and a few stolen seconds on a screen. He thought about walking away. He thought about pretending none of it ever happened. But deep down, something inside him wouldn't let go. That voice, fragile, terrified, had trusted him of all people. Maybe he was the only one who could make a difference. When he reached his small apartment, he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the wall. Then his phone buzzed. No number. Just unknown caller. His heart jumped. He hesitated, then answered. There was silence at first. Then the same faint whisper. "They know you answered the phone. Be careful. They're watching you." James's hand trembled as the call ended. He looked out the window. Across the street, a black car sat parked under a flickering streetlight. He couldn't see who was inside, but he knew. Someone was watching. His normal life as a cleaner was gone now. He was part of something far bigger and far darker than he ever imagined, and whether he liked it or not, there was no turning back. James arrived early again the next morning, but this time his stomach churned with unease. The sleepless night had left dark circles under his eyes, yet his senses were sharp. Every sound, every whisper in the tall glass building felt loaded with hidden meaning now. He wasn't just a cleaner anymore. He was a man who had heard too much. The CEO's office floor was still quiet, the lights dim and cold. As he pushed his mop bucket past the conference room, he froze. The door was slightly open. Inside, the long glass table gleamed under soft lights, and on it lay a stack of folders with bold red tags. One caught his attention immediately: Project Zenith. The name pulsed in his mind like a heartbeat. He hesitated. He wasn't supposed to be there, but curiosity had its claws deep in him now. That whispering voice on the phone, the warning, the strange message he saw on the CEO's tablet. It all pointed to this. He glanced down the hallway. No one was there. The cameras above blinked lazily, recording nothing but still air. James took a deep breath and stepped inside. His old shoes made no sound on the carpet. He picked up the folder and opened it. Inside were dozens of documents, foreign contracts, transfer notes, hidden agreements. He couldn't understand all of it, but a few phrases were clear enough to chill him. Unsecured foreign accounts, unauthorized client, offshore transfer upon signing. He turned the page and found a letterhead with a logo he recognized, an energy company that had collapsed years ago in a fraud scandal. Why was its name buried inside this new project? Then he saw something that made his pulse jump. A page with names, and one was circled in black ink: Richard Wallace. Next to it, another name: Victor Hale, the same aide in the black suit. James's hands shook as he realized what this meant. The CEO's right-hand man wasn't helping him. He was betraying him. The deal wasn't about business at all. It was about stealing everything from Wallace and making him take the fall. Suddenly, a noise snapped him out of his thoughts. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Someone was coming. He panicked, stuffed the folder back on the table, and grabbed his mop. The door opened and Victor Hale entered. The tall aide looked around, his sharp eyes sweeping the room. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and cold. James swallowed hard. "Just cleaning, sir." "I didn't want to interrupt." Victor's gaze lingered on the table, then back to James. "You like to clean early, don't you?" he said, a faint smile curling his lips, but it wasn't friendly. "Careful you don't clean the wrong thing." James nodded quickly and left, pushing his cart down the hall, his palms sweaty on the handle. His heart pounded so loud he could barely think. That man knew something. Maybe he even suspected James had seen the documents. He needed to warn the CEO, but how? Wallace would never listen to a janitor. The whole building treated him like a ghost. He thought of writing another note like before, but this time the stakes were higher. If Victor found out, it wouldn't just be his job on the line. It could be his life. At lunch, James sat alone again in the storage room, staring at the floor. He took out his old phone and looked at the missed call list. The mysterious number still sat there, unknown caller. He tried calling back, but it went straight to dead silence. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. That's when something on the shelf caught his eye. An old company memo pinned on the board. It listed the day's schedule: meeting with Zenith representatives, 2 p.m. sharp. He checked the clock. That was in 3 hours. 3 hours until the CEO signed away everything. 3 hours until the trap closed. He couldn't sit still. He went back upstairs, pretending to polish the glass walls, but really, he was listening. He caught fragments of conversation: Wallace boasting about international trust, the lawyers talking about final documents, Victor making calls in a foreign tongue. The air felt tight, like it was holding a secret too big to stay hidden. At one point, Victor brushed past James and muttered something under his breath. "Some people don't know their place." The words hit like a blade. When James reached the CEO's office again, the door was closed. He could hear faint laughter inside, Wallace and Victor together, unaware of what was about to happen. He leaned against his cart, shaking his head. If he did nothing, the man would be ruined. If he spoke, no one would believe him. And then, like fate itself was nudging him, his eyes fell on a notepad sitting near the copier. He tore a small sheet and wrote in shaky letters, "Do not sign. You're being betrayed." He didn't sign his name. He didn't dare. but he folded the note carefully and slipped it under the CEO's office door when no one was looking. Then he walked away, pretending nothing had happened. Minutes later, he heard the CEO's voice echo down the hallway, startled and confused. Papers shuffled. People whispered. The meeting was postponed suddenly. James didn't know it yet, but that single note had stopped a billion-dollar disaster. He had just crossed a line between being invisible and being the reason powerful men lost sleep. That night, as the city lights shimmered through the glass walls, James looked down at the mop in his hand and whispered, "If this is what being seen feels like, I'm ready for whatever comes next." But deep inside he knew someone like Victor Hale wouldn't let this go quietly. And the next move in this deadly game was already on its way. The office was different that morning. It wasn't the smell of coffee or the hum of printers, it was the tension in the air. People whispered more quietly, walked faster, avoided eye contact. James could feel it as soon as he entered with his mop and bucket. Something had changed since the night he slid that anonymous note under the CEO's door. He kept his head low, pretending to clean. But his eyes were alert. Through the glass walls he saw groups of executives moving between offices, faces pale, voices tight. The big meeting was canceled yesterday after the CEO found the warning note. Nobody knew who wrote it. The gossip was wild. Some said a whistleblower, others said corporate espionage. But James knew the truth. It had been him. He wanted to stay invisible, to blend in like always, but fate didn't plan to let him. Just before noon, a tall security guard approached him. "Mr. Wallace wants to see you now." James's heart dropped. He followed the guard up to the top floor. The elevator doors opened into the CEO's private suite, polished wood, glass, and silence. Richard Wallace stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "James Carter," the CEO said. "You've been with the cleaning staff 5 years?" "Yes, sir," James replied, voice quiet. The CEO gestured for him to sit. "Yesterday, before I was about to sign the Zenith deal, someone left this note on my desk." He held up the small folded paper. The exact one James had written. "You see, it said not to sign because I was being betrayed. And then, by pure chance, my security chief found evidence of forged transfers in the contract. You saved my company." James swallowed. He could deny it. He could walk away right now, but his conscience wouldn't let him lie. "Sir, I was cleaning your office that morning. I heard a call the day before. A woman warned not to sign. I thought it was a prank, but something felt wrong. Then I saw your aide, Mr. Hale, making strange calls. I had to do something." The CEO studied him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You did more than my entire team of analysts. I owe you." Before James could respond, the door burst open. Victor Hale entered, his face tight. "Sir, we need to discuss this nonsense rumor about the Zenith deal." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw James sitting there. His eyes narrowed. Wallace's tone hardened. "Victor, I've already spoken to the board. The deal is under investigation. You can hand in your phone and badge." Victor's mask cracked for a moment, pure fury behind his polite smile. He looked at James like a snake about to strike. "Be careful who you trust, sir," he said, his voice low. Then he walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. James let out a shaky breath. "He's dangerous," he murmured. "I know," Wallace said quietly. "But don't worry. You've done enough. Go home. Take a week off." James nodded and left, but peace didn't follow him. That night his phone rang again, unknown caller. His chest tightened. He answered. "Mr. Carter," the voice whispered. It was the same woman, faint but alive. "They didn't find me yet. You stopped them, but be careful. Hale isn't finished." Before he could speak, the call cut off. The next day the building was even more chaotic. Victor was gone, but the damage he left behind wasn't. Half the staff were being questioned. Files were missing. The news had leaked. Wallace's billion-dollar deal had collapsed hours before signing, but the reason was a mystery. James wanted to disappear back into his routine, but something inside told him he couldn't yet. He started noticing small things again. Someone following him after work, lights flickering near his storage room, strange numbers calling his phone but hanging up when he answered. Late that afternoon, while he was mopping the hallway, a young assistant brushed past and whispered, "The boss said thank you again." She smiled kindly before leaving. James smiled too, but his peace was short-lived. When he turned around, A small white envelope lay on his cleaning cart. His name was written on it. He opened it and froze. Inside was a photo of him sitting in the CEO's office with Wallace. On the back, a single sentence. Next time, mind your own business. His hands shook. He looked up and down the hallway, but no one was there. Whoever had left it was already gone. That night, as he walked home under the streetlights, James realized this wasn't over. He wasn't just a cleaner anymore. He had become something else. An accidental messenger in a world where truth and power collided. And now that he'd spoken once, he knew silence was no longer an option. Rain fell hard that morning, washing the glass walls of the skyscraper in silver streaks. James stood outside the revolving doors, staring at his faint reflection. He almost turned back. After the note, after the warning calls, after the photo in the envelope, he had promised himself to walk away. But he couldn't. Something inside him refused to hide. When he stepped inside, the building felt wrong. Too quiet. The receptionists weren't smiling. Security guards whispered to each other, glancing toward the upper floors. The world above, the world of suits, money, and power, was shaking. And somehow, a cleaner had become part of the earthquake. He was barely halfway up the corridor when two guards appeared. "Mr. Wallace wants to see you," one said. Their tone wasn't friendly this time. James followed them to the elevator, his palms sweating. The doors opened to the CEO's office, but the atmosphere wasn't the same. Gone was the calm confidence. Now the room was filled with tension. Documents were scattered on the table. Wallace's face was pale. Two other men were there, one in a gray suit with sharp eyes, and another with a government ID clipped to his jacket. "Sit down, James," Wallace said. His voice was softer now, almost tired. "These men are investigators. They found something I wish wasn't true." James sat quietly as the investigator opened a folder and began speaking. "Your warning led us to recheck the Zenith files. We traced offshore accounts and intercepted encrypted messages. Mr. Victor Hale wasn't just a traitor. He was working with the rival corporation that planned to destroy this company from within." James blinked. The truth hit harder than he expected. The man he'd seen every day, the one giving orders to others, had been the enemy all along. The investigator continued, "That phone call you answered, the woman wasn't random. She was a financial analyst at Zenith. When she tried to warn your CEO, they silenced her. She managed to make one call before they took her." James's breath caught. "She's alive?" The man hesitated. "We're not sure. We've been trying to track her, but she vanished 3 days ago." Wallace leaned forward. "That woman's warning, your note, it saved not just me, but thousands of jobs. But it also exposed something larger. Hale leaked data to criminal networks. We're working with law enforcement now." James's head spun. He wasn't ready for any of this. He was just a cleaner who picked up a ringing phone. And yet, here, he was sitting with men who talked about espionage, corruption, and power. But there was something in Wallace's expression, a mix of gratitude and guilt. "James," the CEO said quietly, "I need to ask you something. How much do you know?" James told him everything, about the first call, the desperate voice, the deleted message he saw, the suspicious behavior of Hale, and even the photo left on his cart. When he finished, the room was silent. The investigator frowned. "That photo means someone inside is still watching you. Hale may be gone, but his allies aren't." James tried to speak, but the CEO interrupted, his tone firm now. "You're not safe here anymore." "Sir, I'm not afraid," James said, though his hands trembled slightly. "That woman risked her life to warn you. I can't walk away now." Wallace looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You have more courage than half the people on this floor. All right, but if you're staying, you'll have protection. From now on, you're not just cleaning floors, you'll report directly to me." The words hit James like thunder. The janitor, the man no one noticed, was now part of the CEO's circle. He didn't even know how to react. Hours later, as he returned to his duties, whispers followed him. Everyone knew something had happened, though no one knew what. Some stared in awe, others in suspicion. But James didn't care. For the first time in his life, his name meant something. Still, deep inside, a shadow grew. The woman's voice haunted him. "They didn't find me yet. Be careful." That night, after the office emptied, James stayed late. He walked into the same office where the phone had first rung. He stared at it for a long time, remembering how it all began. Then suddenly it started ringing again. His pulse raced. He stepped closer, his heart hammering. Slowly, he lifted the receiver. "James," the voice whispered. It was her again, weak, but alive. "They're coming for the CEO tonight. Don't let him leave the building." The line went dead. James stood frozen, then rushed toward the elevators. He didn't think. He just moved. Somewhere between the floors of glass and steel, a cleaner had become a protector once more, and this time it wasn't about saving a deal. It was about saving a life. The night air inside the skyscraper felt heavier than usual, thick with a silence that pressed against the walls. James stood near the executive floor, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. The woman's final words still burned in his mind. "Don't let him leave the building." He didn't know who she was or how she was still alive, but he trusted that voice. It had never been wrong. The CEO, Richard Wallace, was preparing to leave. James could see him through the glass, slipping on his coat, a folder tucked under his arm. The elevator lights glowed faintly, ready to take him down to the car waiting below. James didn't think. He just ran. "Sir, wait." His voice cracked through the quiet hallway. Wallace turned, startled. The guards at the door stiffened. "What is it, Carter?" James caught his breath. "You can't leave the building, sir. Please just listen. Someone's coming for you." Wallace frowned, confusion and irritation mixing in his face. "James, what are you talking about?" Before James could answer, the lights flickered. The hum of the air system died. Total darkness swallowed the hall for 2 long seconds. Then emergency lights flicked on, painting everything in red. The guards drew their weapons. From the lower floor came a sound, the shatter of glass. Then another. James's pulse raced. "They're here," he whispered. The guards rushed toward the elevator, shouting into radios, but static answered. Wallace stood frozen for a moment, trying to process what was happening. James grabbed his sleeve. "This way," he urged. He led him through the maintenance corridor, one of the few places he knew better than anyone. They ducked behind cleaning carts and service doors as shadows moved across the frosted glass walls. The attackers weren't random. They moved with precision. Professionals, probably hired by the same people Hale worked for. James pushed open a narrow door that led into a storage area. "Stay here," he said. Wallace looked at him in disbelief. "You expect me to hide in a broom closet?" James turned to him sharply, his eyes fierce. "You expect me to let you die? You trusted the wrong people before, trust me now." For a moment, the powerful billionaire said nothing. Then he nodded. James closed the door quietly and slipped back into the hall. He knew the layout like his own reflection, every shortcut, every blind spot. Years of cleaning had given him a map no security software could match. Moving quickly, he reached the control panel near the stairwell and pulled the emergency lock switch, sealing the elevators. That would buy them time. But as he turned, a figure stepped out of the shadows. A man in black tactical gear, gun raised. James froze. The man spoke into his headset. "Target's not in the elevator. He's still inside." James didn't think. He hurled his mop bucket toward the man's legs. The water splashed across the floor. The man slipped, and James tackled him hard. The gun slid away, skidding under a desk. The two struggled briefly before James grabbed the man's radio and smashed it against the floor. The attacker cursed and fled. James's lungs burned. He knew they'd be back in seconds. He sprinted to the storage room, yanked the door open, and whispered, "We have to move now." They ran through the side corridor toward the basement exit. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Police finally responding to the alarms James had triggered. The sound gave him strength. When they finally reached the underground parking area, Wallace turned to him, trembling. You saved my life, he said. Twice. James just shook his head. You gave me a job when no one else would. Maybe this was my way of paying it back. Minutes later, the police stormed the building. Several attackers were caught. Others vanished into the night. Wallace gave his statement, but he didn't mention the cleaner's name. He knew this story wasn't over. The people behind Hale still had reach. But he also knew one truth. If not for James Carter, he'd be dead. A week later, the building buzzed again, not with fear, but with rumors. Some said the janitor had fought off assassins. Others said he'd saved the company from ruin. None knew how much was true. In the CEO's office, a press conference was underway. Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and then Wallace gestured toward the back of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, smiling faintly. Sometimes heroes don't wear suits or badges. Sometimes they carry a mop. The crowd turned as James stepped in, wearing his clean gray uniform. The applause that followed was like thunder. Reporters shouted questions, but James said nothing. He just gave a small nod and a shy smile. Wallace placed a hand on his shoulder. Mr. Carter, he said, from today you're no longer part of the cleaning staff. You're the new head of security and operations. This company will never forget what you've done. James blinked, speechless. The crowd cheered louder. That evening he stood alone in the penthouse balcony, the one usually reserved for the elite. The city stretched below, glowing gold and blue. Somewhere down there, he had once been invisible, sweeping floors no one noticed. Now he was guarding the man whose world he had saved. He closed his eyes as the wind brushed his face. For the first time, he didn't feel small. From mop to mansion, it wasn't luck that brought him here. It was courage. And courage, he realized, didn't care about uniforms. Weeks passed since the night of chaos. The skyscraper gleamed again in the morning light, spotless and calm as if nothing had ever happened. But for James Carter, nothing was the same. He no longer pushed a mop down those marble floors. Now he wore a badge, not a name tag. His office overlooked the same corridors he once cleaned, and people who never noticed him before now greeted him with respect. Some even whispered his name like a story, the cleaner who saved the CEO. But James didn't care about the attention. Every time he walked past the CEO's old office, his eyes drifted to the corner where the phone had once rung. The memory of that trembling voice still echoed in his mind. Please, help me. Tell him not to sign the deal. He had stopped a billion-dollar disaster, saved a man's life, and uncovered betrayal. But one thing still haunted him. The woman who had made that call. Was she alive? Was she safe? Or had she vanished into the dark world that used her as a warning? One rainy evening, long after the staff had gone home, James stayed behind to check security logs. He was reviewing footage of that night, angles, timestamps, unknown faces, when suddenly his office phone rang. A familiar chill ran through him. The same sound, the same tone, the same phone that had changed his life. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then picked it up. James Carter, he said softly. The line crackled. Then that same faint, broken voice whispered, You kept your promise. James froze. It was her, the woman who started it all. Where are you? He asked, standing up. Are you safe? There was a long pause. I am now, she said. They tried to silence me, but your warning stopped everything. I was rescued by the people you alerted that night. They told me how you saved the man I tried to protect. James felt the tightness in his chest loosen for the first time in weeks. I thought you were gone, he said quietly. You didn't give up, she replied. That's what saved us both. Her voice trembled slightly. You should know something, James. I was the one who sent that first message into the system, the one that triggered the call to that office. It was meant to reach anyone who would listen, but I never thought the one who'd answer would be a cleaner. James smiled faintly, tears stinging his eyes. Sometimes the right person doesn't need a title, he said. They just need to care enough to pick up the phone. The woman's laugh was soft, tired, almost peaceful. Goodbye, James, she whispered. If we ever meet again, I'll thank you properly. But for now, keep that heart of yours safe. The world needs people like you. The line went silent. James lowered the phone slowly, staring at it. The same desk, the same cord, the same old device, and yet It had carried two voices across miles and fate itself. He stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the empty office. Moments later, the CEO entered quietly. "You're still here, Carter?" James nodded. "Just finishing up, sir." Wallace smiled. "You've done more than finish up. You've rebuilt this place. People trust again. You gave us that." James looked out the window at the glowing skyline. "It wasn't me alone," he said softly. "Sometimes it just takes one small voice and someone willing to listen." Wallace placed a hand on his shoulder. "You remind me that greatness doesn't always come from the top floor." Then he left, the door closing behind him. Alone again, James leaned against the glass and watched the rain fall over the city. Somewhere out there, the mysterious woman was alive, free because he had chosen to listen. He smiled quietly to himself. He had gone from invisible to irreplaceable, not because of luck, but because he had done what no one else would. He cared. As the clock ticked past midnight, James turned off the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the city behind. The phone on his desk sat silent once more, but in that silence, he heard everything, the fear, the courage, the choice that had changed both their lives. And as he walked out into the cool night, one thought stayed with him. A hero isn't born in power. Sometimes he's just a man who answers a call no one else dares to. Though the story seemed to have ended, life had one more twist waiting for James Carter. Months had passed since that haunting final call, and the skyscraper had returned to its usual rhythm. Sharp suits, shining shoes, and deals worth millions made over cold coffee and colder hearts. Yet beneath the surface something had shifted forever. James wasn't the same man anymore. The cleaner who once mopped those marble floors now carried the authority to guard them. People called him Mr. Carter with respect now. But every time he looked at the CEO's desk phone, the same one that had changed his fate, he couldn't help but wonder, was it all truly over? One evening, as the last employees rushed home, James stayed behind to check the building's surveillance reports. The rain outside painted the city gold under streetlights. He sipped stale coffee, fighting the growing feeling that something was about to happen again. And then right on cue, the phone rang. Not his new office phone, not the encrypted line, the phone. The old one. The same one that had once whispered warnings and saved lives. James froze. His heart skipped. Slowly, he picked up the receiver. "James Carter," he said cautiously. This time it wasn't the woman's trembling voice. It was a man's, calm, confident, and cold. "Mr. Carter," the voice said, "you made powerful enemies when you interfered. You've caused inconvenience." James's hand tightened on the receiver. "Who are you?" The voice chuckled softly. "Let's say I work for the people who preferred that deal to go through. People who don't forget. We have a new plan and you, my friend, are going to help us fix what you broke." James's pulse spiked. "I'm not helping anyone like you," he said firmly. "Ah," the man replied, amusement in his tone. "You might change your mind when you see what's at stake." A click sounded, then silence. Seconds later, James's personal phone buzzed with a message. He opened it and froze. It was a picture of his sister, Mia, sitting on her apartment couch smiling. But the timestamp was from 5 minutes ago. His stomach turned to ice. They knew where she lived. James didn't waste time. He ran out of the office, rain pounding against the windows as lightning flashed outside. He called Wallace on the move. "Sir, they're back," he said breathlessly. "They've taken interest in my family." Wallace didn't hesitate. "Where are you?" "Heading to my sister's place." "I'll send security support," Wallace said. "James, don't do anything reckless." But James was already gone. The city blurred past as he drove through the storm, tires splashing through puddles. Every light, every shadow felt like eyes watching him. When he reached his sister's apartment, the door was slightly open. He rushed inside, but she was safe, frightened but unharmed. On her table lay an envelope marked with the same symbol from the Zenith documents. Inside was a message written in block letters. "You stopped us once. Next time you won't even hear the call." James stared at the note, rain dripping from his coat. He knew what it meant. The game wasn't over. The people behind Victor Hale were still out there, powerful enough to reach into his world whenever they pleased. Wallace arrived moments later with 2 security officers. He read the note, his face grim. They're testing you, he said. They want fear. Don't give it to them, James looked up. Fear's not what they'll get. From that night forward, James changed again. He upgraded the company's entire security system, built protocols even the board hadn't thought of, and personally monitored data transfers for months. His instincts were sharper, his trust smaller, and his will stronger. But one thing never changed: his humanity. He didn't let the darkness swallow him. Every day he still greeted the janitors, shared coffee with the guards, and made sure no one in the building ever felt invisible again. One evening, long after the building lights dimmed, Wallace found him standing by the same phone again. You know, the CEO said gently, you could quit. You've done enough for a lifetime, James smiled faintly. Maybe. But as long as this phone's still here, someone has to be the one who answers it. Wallace looked at him, the man who had once been a cleaner now standing as the company's quiet guardian, and nodded. Then I hope the world never stops hearing people like you. James watched as the CEO left. The city lights shimmered through the glass, and for a moment, he saw his reflection in the window. Not the man he once was, but the man he had become. Stronger, wiser, unshakable. The phone stayed silent that night, but James didn't mind. He sat beside it, smiling softly. Whether the next call brought danger or hope, he was ready. Because courage, he'd learned, wasn't about never being afraid. It was about picking up the call anyway. And so, the man who once cleaned other people's messes had become something far greater, the man who protected them from their own darkness. It had been 6 quiet months since the last threat. 6 months since James Carter stood between billionaires and betrayal, between power and ruin. The world had moved on. The news had stopped talking about the mysterious janitor who saved a fortune. The company had recovered, bigger and stronger than before. On the surface, everything was normal. But deep down, James knew peace like this never lasted forever. He had learned that silence often came before the storm. One evening, the city was glowing under a blood-orange sunset when James received a strange package at his new office. There was no return address, no sender name, just his initials written in ink so dark it bled through the paper. Inside the box was a single object, an old-fashioned rotary phone painted black and covered in faint scratches. Beneath it was a small card that read, "It's your turn to call." James stared at it for a long time. The phone didn't have a cord, no power connection, no reason to work at all. But as he touched the receiver, a faint hum ran through it like a heartbeat. He placed it on his desk, uneasy. Was it another threat? A message? Or something else entirely? Later that night, when the building emptied and the rain started to fall, the phone rang. The sound was sharp, metallic, echoing across the dark office. James hesitated, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. He lifted the receiver. "Mr. Carter," came a calm, robotic voice. "You don't know us, but we know you. You interfered with something far greater than you can imagine. The Zenith project was never just a business deal. It was the cover for a global network. You stopped one branch. Now the others are moving." James's throat went dry. "What do you want from me?" "To finish what you started," the voice replied. "We need your help. We need a man no one sees coming. A man like you." For a moment, James didn't speak. It felt like a trap. But it also sounded real, and deep down he still remembered that woman's trembling voice asking for help all those months ago. Maybe others needed him now. He exhaled slowly. "If this is a trick, I'll find you," the voice chuckled. "We're counting on that." The line went dead. The next morning, James arrived early, his mind full of questions. He found Wallace waiting for him with a grim look. "We need to talk," the CEO said. "I got a message last night, too, about Zenith. About something called the Black Circle." James froze. "You too?" Wallace nodded. "They said the same thing. They want to recruit you." James felt the air grow heavier. This wasn't random. Whoever these people were, they were connected to everything that had happened. The woman, the betrayal, the threats. Maybe even to Hale himself. That afternoon, as he left the building, a sleek black car pulled up beside him. A tinted window rolled down just enough for him to see a familiar face. The woman from the call. Her eyes were tired, her voice calm. "James," she said, "you were never meant to be part of this. But now you are." He stood frozen on the wet pavement, the city lights flickering around them. "You're alive," he whispered. She nodded. Alive, but not free. Not yet. The people who used me, who tried to kill Wallace, they're still out there, and they're watching us both. The difference is you're the only one they fear. The car door opened. Get in, she said. It's time you see the truth. James looked back at the tall building behind him, the one he once cleaned, then protected. For a moment he considered walking away. He could have gone home, lived quietly, let the past stay buried, but he knew he wouldn't. He stepped into the car. As the door shut and the city disappeared behind tinted glass, James felt the weight of the unknown settle on his shoulders again. The woman handed him a tablet showing satellite maps, encrypted files, and one familiar logo, Zenith. But this time it wasn't tied to a company. It was tied to governments, corporations, even secret agencies. James leaned back, whispering, "So this was never about money." The woman met his eyes. "No," she said. "It was about control." He looked out at the city one last time before they sped away into the night. Somewhere in that endless web of power, danger, and lies, a cleaner had become a soldier in a silent war. And this time, he wasn't answering the call. He was making it.